Hey, Richard here again, Facts for Working People, Facts for Working People blog. I wanted to make a couple of comments about the obsession with us spending. They say consumer spending is 2/3 of the economy and blah, blah, blah. So the obsession with spending. So I was looking at today's, I think it was today's or yesterday's Wall Street Journal editorial about the lockdown and about another lockdown because of the surge and so forth with the pandemic. I mean, they're talking about it's a catastrophe. I mean, you've got there's this obsession with opening the economy. Trump, we hear it from Trump all the time. The Journal's talking about it here, and we've got to get the economy back on track. So, what is the motivation behind this? The second quarter they reported was the U.S. GDP fell by 32.9%, 33%, the worst ever recorded drop in GDP. So they're desperate to get the economy going back. They don't want that. And the greatest harm, I think it was about 19% of that or whatever, was consumer spending. People are not spending money. They're not buying things. So the journal says, well, you know, we've got to get back. We've got to get the economy going again because, you know, in the same editorial, they said they had $3 trillion in outlays that they've given, $1,200 in cash payments and jobless benefits. Couldn't stop this. It can't replace that. Cannot replace a dynamic private sector economy. And so there's a whole section of the US ruling class that is desperate to not have another lockdown. And that we get back to the consumer spending, we get people back to work. No more handouts, basically, is what they're saying. Because if you give people money, they won't want to work. And this is one of the claims. If you give people money, they won't want to work. They'll stay at home, and you'll never. They won't want to spend if you give them money. Why would they spend? And the journal says in this editorial, would you want another second quarter lockdown? Now remember, or another 30% of GDP. In a second lockdown, is that what you want? Now you've got to remember when you're reading the Wall Street Journal and when you're reading Business Week, The Economist, when you're reading the Financial Times, when you're reading these journals, workers in the main, we don't read them. I was taught by some people, I was helped by some people to read them in a different way. I never read them at all before. But the Wall Street Journal is speaking to the capitalist class, to the rulers of the world, basically. Certainly a major section of the people that rule the world. And so they're not speaking to us. They're talking to their own kind. They say, do you want the threat of a second lockdown? And so Americans won't spend. Is that what you want? So what we have to ask ourselves is, why is this obsession with spending? Whenever we have a media, we live in a society, there's media, there's information comes at us, it comes through universities, it comes in the mass media, it comes on the television and everything else. And there's a certain section of society that controls the levers of that controls the means of communication. They're the same people, same group of people that control the means of production, that control the banks, that control the finance industry, the health industry. All the major social means of producing the necessities of life, they control. And so not only do they control the means of manufacturing commodities and what should be manufactured, they control the dominant ideas in the society. So when they say we want jobs, when they argue against the minimum wage, because it'll mean a loss of jobs, there's no organic connection there. There's no organic connection there, but they want us to think, oh, look, we'll lose our jobs. That's the argument they make. If you raise the minimum wage, people won't hire. If you raise the minimum wage, a hamburger will cost you $20. All of this is nonsense. There's no organic link between prices and wages. what will happen if you force higher prices on them is it will cut into their profits if they can't raise price. If you force higher wages on them, is it'll cut into their profits if you can't raise prices. If they can't raise prices, the idea they'd raise prices anytime, whether they're making money or not making money. They're capitalists. That's what they do. During the 90s, they couldn't raise prices because labour was tight. Labour, which is a commodity, labour power, workers were tight. And so wages increase at the bottom end of the fast food industry, for example, because they were paying above it. There was the supply and demand of labour was such that they were forced to pay above the state or federal minimum wage, and a worker would say if he went to Burger King or she went to Burger King, oh no, I can get more than that down at Wendy's. So this bull that they go on about, we care about jobs. No, they don't care about jobs. They wouldn't care about jobs at all. So whenever we read and hear, and we do it in through the media, we hear on the TV stations and everything else, we have to look at who is saying this. And so why the obsession with spending? Well, if we understand that wealth in society, and Marx was the great genius here. He wasn't the only economist in the world. He follows in he has history with Smith and Ricardo and these other economists. But if we understand, as he pointed out, that profit comes not from simply selling a commodity above buying something for cheaper and then selling it something for more money than you paid for it. It is not generated in that process of buying and selling. It's realized in that process. And I'll tell you what I mean here is that, and I'm not an economist, so bear with me, is that wealth in capitalist society is created through the labor process. It's created in that process we call work. Where I go to work, most of us sell our labor power, our ability to work. We sell our labor power, and with that, as a remuneration, we get wages. We get a certain amount of pay. Well, the great deal for the capitalist is that we produce our value over a certain period of time. Let's say 4 hours. Let's say a small factory, 4 hours. The workers there produce the value in the interaction with the machinery and the cloth and the whatever whatever it is, the machinery and the products, the raw material that makes up the finished product. When you put the labor and that together, at the end there is more value produced through that process than they pay us in wages. So the obsession with selling comes from the fact it's called surplus value, that we produce above what our labor, we produce more value than our labor we are paid for. It is surplus value. Well, the capitalist doesn't pay for that. They don't send us home at the end of 4 hours and say, okay, you've done that, thank you. No, they say you got to work till 4 o'clock, till 5 o'clock or so. That's why they fiercely resist shortening the working day without a cut in pay. Because what that does, it decreases the amount of free labor power that they get in whatever commodity and labor process they're investing in. So why that's important is then we see the obsession for selling. So what if we don't sell? We don't buy, what's the big deal that the consumer is not spending? You know, I mean, we spend on things to eat and necessities and that, but society can provide that quite easily. We all make it. Most of the food I eat, the people that produce certainly the vegetables, and most of the meat in this country and in this state is produced by workers who get paid nothing, you know, and work long hours and are completely abused. So it's not that we can produce, but in a private economy, they control the labor process. The reason that they're obsessed with selling and they're obsessed with getting this economy back on is the wealth production. The wealth production, profits, surplus value, those things, and profits come out of the surplus value, are not being generated. The whole reason they invest in the economy is for the surplus value and the profit that comes out of it. So they've got to sell the object. right? They're not obsessed with us not going out to spend because, oh, they're probably hungry. They're sitting at home. Maybe they haven't got enough money. Really worried about it. We've got to get the economy going. Not what they care about. That's not what they care about. If they cared about it, they wouldn't worry about the unemployed or anything like that. They would worry rather about the unemployed. If they cared about us, there wouldn't be such a thing as somebody that can't get health care. The Wall Street Journal the other day had another editorial about anarchy because of the Black Lives Matter and anarchy is everywhere. It's not anarchy that 40 million people can't get medical care, decent medical care, that people are sleeping under the freeways. Well, I go up to Oakland where I used to work. There's whole tent cities. That's not anarchy. Is that anarchy? No, that's their fault if they go get a job, or whatever. So the thing is, this is what's happening here with the obsession with selling. So one of the things we need to learn about this pandemic in a way is that look at all the trillions that they've come up with. We're going to have to pay that back. They'll make us pay that back. They haven't cut the defense budget particularly, a little bit, I think. But the main thing for us, it's like when they say in the big business press, demand's not there. Where there's no demand. What do you mean no demand? People need places to live. If you're talking globally, there's no demand in Africa? People are starving to death. What do you mean there's no demand? Well, they need things. There's a demand, but they can't buy them. They can't buy them. And in the free market economy, in capitalism, if you can't buy the food, then you starve. And people starve by the hundreds of thousands in this world. And all the talk about the rising poverty, the decline in poverty, is predominantly China. So it's predominantly China that there's been such a drastic drop in poverty and the poverty rate and all of that sort of thing. So the main thing to remember when they're talking about we need you to spend, it's not that we need you to spend because you're going to go hungry and we don't want you to go hungry, so we want to try and, what they want to do is get that process up, get that labour process going, so that they can, so that out of that labour process, and the part of the labour process they're involved in is capital. They have the capital, we have the labour power. And they come out of that process, that's where they get their value, their money, their profits and so forth. And so that once we understand that, we begin to see why this obsession. I'm an immigrant. I came here from another country, a capitalist country, but it's the most dominant. You're in the belly of the beast here. Anybody that tells you that comes from another country, sell, sell, sell. They never leave you alone. Sometimes I can't watch a movie at night because the ads are coming at me every three minutes on a Friday or whatever, because they will not leave me alone. That's not an American genetic thing. It's not because we're bad people. It's not because of Satan. It's not because there's homosexuals or gay people and God's punishing us. None of this. It's because the labour process under capitalism is the source of their profit, and that profit can only be realised through the sale of the commodity, and that's what happens. And as a matter of fact, labour power is so productive. More and more money, more and more activity and economic activity is in the financial sector, in the possession of capital. Because look, in America, in the US here, most of our industrial production is shifted abroad. In Britain, the same thing. Why build a steel and concrete factory? My money's tied up in there when I can just deal in money, which is what they do. They deal in money. They're coupon clippers. So anyway, I just thought I wanted to say that. That's why they're opposing the second lockdown. And what we need to understand is we produce the wealth. There should be the pharmaceutical industry, the drug industry, the healthcare industry, agricultural production, transportation, housing, healthcare. All of these should not be a business. They should be taken over. They should be publicly owned. They should be controlled, managed by the workers that work in them, the consumers that use them, and so forth. Even in a capitalist economy, a capitalist society, the nationalization of these industries is better than having them private and more efficient. So anyway, that's what I had to say to get off my chest. So our blog is Facts for Working People. Our URL is weknowwhatsup.blogspot.com, and there's an email address on there if you want to write give us any questions. We also have discussions generally once a week about events and things. And if you feel like you might want to come on that, send us an email and we'll talk about it. All right, so thanks very much. Just a few comments.